You're now listening to Sound Talent Media. Check out more shows at soundtalentmedia.com.
TIAA is on a mission. Why? Because 54% of Black Americans don't have enough savings to retire. So in collaboration with big-name artists like Wyclef Jean, TIAA released Paper Right, new music inspiring a new financial future. With 100% of streaming sales going to a nonprofit that teaches students how to invest. Stream Paper Right now and help close the gap.
What is up, everybody? I hope you are well and things are groovy wherever this episode is meeting your ears. This one is a really fun episode, and it requires a little bit of explaining, so I'll go ahead and do that right now. It just shows you how weird the universe is and how you never know what might happen. So we have to rewind to years and years ago, back when I first started the podcast even. I first started the podcast, Scott Marquardt from Stringjoy reached out around episode 20 or so to come on. We hit it off. A bunch of other stuff happened, and we became business partners shortly thereafter in the new-ish company at the time, Stringjoy Heartstrings. As you guys are all aware, that has become a huge part of what I do, so much in fact that I had to make an emergency flight to Nashville back in October to prepare for us getting into Sweetwater, along with a product launch and a whole bunch of other stuff. It just was an all hands on deck situation. So I flew to Nashville with a day's notice, worked as much as I possibly could with the team there, got everything nailed down, and I was flying back home. While I was waiting to board the plane, I noticed a lady kind of close-ish to me carrying a guitar case. And of course, like every guitar nerd, I immediately thought, now what do you suppose is in that little case there? And basically didn't think much of it after that. I wasn't going to go interrupt anybody when we were about to board. But as fate would have it, I mistakenly looked at the letters wrong on my ticket and sat in a middle row seat next to the person carrying the guitar. And that person is Mo. That person is today's guest. Mo Tedder is a songwriter from Nashville. She is super, super cool. We had an incredible conversation on our way to Utah. Normally, I put my headphones on and kind of zone out, but no, Mo and I chatted basically the whole time because, of course, I asked her, did I see you carrying a guitar onto this plane? And of course, we talked about the guitar and we got into more of what she does musically. And it turns out she's doing some of the coolest stuff with music that you could possibly think of. She's helping people out of their darkest moments by helping them craft songs in a sort of therapeutic situation. Now, she's not a music therapist herself. We have had music therapists on the show before, and those were great episodes. This is a different thing that she does, and we get into it, and she gets into why and how and her life and all that stuff. And it was just a really, really great conversation. I got a lot of this on the plane, but I thought, you've got to come on the podcast. We've got to record this and let more people know about what you do. And yeah, that's the story of this episode. She's not some big celebrity yet, although I have a sneaking suspicion that that may change one of these days. But she is doing something so important and so cool. I just had to get her on to tell all of you about it. So that's the backstory to this episode. Let's dive in to the actual episode. And I'll keep the business like microscopic. If you want to see me light a guitar pedal on fire, go to the Tone Mob YouTube channel. Okay, anyway, that's enough business. I've already got a long intro on this one. So give it up for Mo Tedder. Here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Tone Mob Podcast, the show about guitar stuff occasionally, sometimes. I'm your host, Blake Weiland, and with me today, I have Mo Tedder. How's it going?
It's going good. Happy to be here.
I will say, whoops, I forgot to turn my heater off. Fixed. This is the first time I've met somebody on a plane and actually did a podcast with them. This is definitely a first for me. How about you?
Same. I think that's kind of just the definition of how my life has gone lately. Like weird things happen and then it's cool what turns out. So yeah, I'm open to new experiences. Yeah.
Well, we got to talking because, of course, I saw you get on the plane with a guitar. So immediately I'm like, that's somebody I would like to talk to. And then me being dumb and in a hurry and not paying attention, I accidentally sat in the wrong seat and ended up sitting next to you. I was supposed to be in the window seat across the aisle. And somehow the guy was like, "Oh, I'm just gonna go ahead and still sit in that window seat." And I'm like, "Well, I guess that is my fault for messing this up." But we started talking and realized I was like, "Hey, I saw you had a guitar," and that just kind of started the whole thing. And I realized you're doing something incredibly unique, at least as far as I'm aware. And I thought, you should come on and tell the people about your story and what you're doing. So maybe before we get into where you're at now, we can start with, the backstory. When did you start playing? How did all that happen? How did the obsession happen?
It happened rather quickly. I was a kid that was just drawn. I had to focus on a lot. And I was drawn to guitar. So I was probably about 8 or 9. And the people around me, they were telling me like, "Oh, like wait until you can fit your hand around the guitar. Like it's important." And I'm like, "No, I want to do it now." So my dad ended up getting me an electric guitar, and they put me in music class, but I quickly got bored with that. Too slow pace. So I just started teaching myself, and my parents probably wanted to kill me because it was constantly, just deadening chords and like it was constant. It was awful, but also it kind of just stuck throughout my whole entire life. I naturally gravitated to songwriting and to get through those big emotions. And that's something I didn't realize until like my 20s, which what is kind of cool. It's full story for me, but I grew up playing in the church. It's where I got my start. I got to be in the band, and we got to travel to New York, Raleigh, and I get to play in really cool places. So forever grateful for that experience. And and then moved to Nashville and got a whole new view of things here. So.
Yeah. And so you primarily, since you've been in Nashville, how long have you been in Nashville?
I'm going on 5 years.
Yeah. So you primarily, while you were there, were focusing on songwriting and collaboration and that, if I remember the story correctly. Is that right?
Yeah. So I moved to Nashville, actually not following music. I put music down for about 4 or 5 years, just because, life happens and you listen to everybody else in society saying that this isn't a career for you, right?
Sure.
So I did the business route thing and quickly discovered that I was very miserable. So I moved to Nashville just to be closer to music, and a really weird part of events happened. And that's why I'm saying like, this has happened throughout my life where I just meet people on planes or, weird things. So I was just down on Broadway, what everybody does when you come to Nashville, move to Nashville. Like, I don't know where else music is. So I just spent a lot of time on Broadway, a lot of time drinking, as you do on Broadway. And I met one of the singers that was playing on stage, and it just happened events. I was in between job interviews, and I just popped into the same bar because the bartender was very friendly. And it was like the third time meeting this woman that was performing, and I'm like striking up conversation, everything. She was going through a hard time, broke up with her boyfriend. I was like, "Hey, if you need a place to crash, I have a couch."
Right.
And that night she walked in and she's seeing all the guitars that I have. And she's like, "Do you play?" And I was like, "Yeah, a little bit." And then I had my notebook that I write songs in on the table, and she just opened it up, and me being a little bit more shy at first, I'm like, "Oh my goodness." And she's like, "Wait, do you write?" And I was like, "Yeah." So we ended up staying up until like 5 a.m. writing songs. And like, this is my second or third week actually living in Nashville. And I'm like, well, and she just spoke encouragement into my life and writing. And she's like, "Hey man, you really have a gift." And I was like, nobody really acknowledged that. I came from a family that is not musically based. at all. Sports only. That's how we connected. So weird turn of events that got me into writing. And then it kind of was off to the races at that point. And I was back in 2018.
Wow. Okay. So I know that works differently in Nashville in general than pretty much anywhere else in the world. And I've actually had, I'll meet people and they'll be like, "Oh, you go to Nashville a lot." I'm like, "Yeah, but I'm just like sweating in a shop. It's not, it's not what it sounds like." And even other musicians from other parts of the country, they're like, "I hear that like 10 people get together and write songs," and like, I think so. I hear about that sometimes. And I don't think that happens anywhere else in the world, to be honest, at least not as far as I'm aware. What does that actually look like, week to week or session to session?
Yeah, it's definitely different here than anywhere else. I'm not sure about LA. I think LA, you're getting up to that 10 and 15 range. But here it's usually like 3 to 4. If you have a whole bunch of like really good buddies, close knit, you can get up in higher numbers. And this is just my experience too. But yeah, it's a co-writing city for sure. And I think that's what got me into it, because I don't like writing alone. Like I write alone, like poetry, like super, out there. But as far as like writing songs, I love writing with other people for mainly the fact that I love stories, and getting to be a part of somebody else's story and write that is amazing. But we look like 3 or 4 people at the max in a room that I enjoy writing with, just because you have everybody's energy. Everybody has a opinion, and some people throw their opinion out a lot. And so it is a adjustment sometimes, but I mean, there was a year that I was writing 2 to 3 sessions a day, 5 to 6 days a week.
Wow.
I wouldn't necessarily encourage that for the fact that, it was more quality than quantity. And it's like, you'd have those writes where you're writing with your best friend and you just write something awesome and you're like, yes. And that gives you energy to make it through the rest of the writes. But like, as I grew up in town, I cut it down to like 2 or 3 songs for professional, like radio reasons or for artistic reasons. So
got it.
Does that answer the question?
I think so. I think that gave us a decent summary. So how did you discover, I really wanted to get into what you're doing with your business and, what you're doing with, I don't even really know what to call it. Like, how do you describe what you do with patients and people that you work with? And how did you get into that?
Again, a weird situation. It more just like it worked for me. So I wanted to share that gift with everyone I could. I've seen music has saved my life wholly. I will say that through everything I went through as a kid and even into adulthood. And I would say I just show up as a person in the room that has a ability to put melody to words and kind of act as a witness to somebody's like most vulnerable spot of their lives. Because at the end of the day, when we're in that hard spot, it isn't about finding the right words. It isn't about, it isn't about perfection. It's just about sitting with that person in that space and holding space for them to emote whatever. And what I do is I get to listen to what they say and actually create a piece of art from that.
Yeah.
And they
we should back up a little bit because we talked for like several hours and the listeners are probably going, wait, I'm still confused. So like you will go into a situation usually with the therapist, if I remember correctly, and there will be somebody there having a difficult time for one reason or another, whether that's just straight up mental illness, addiction, whatever the case may be. And you'll actually sit there and create a song with that person, right?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Yeah, that probably needed to be stated before we went too much further down the rabbit hole.
I apologize for that. Sometimes I get tangenty.
Yeah. Well, again, like we said, like we talked for like 3 hours. So I already knew what you were talking about. And I was like, I was just ready to go with it. And like, wait, there's other people listening to this conversation. So let's back up.
Yeah, but I mean, how I got into it, I naturally, like I said, I write about those big feelings in my life. And I have since 9. At 9, I was writing about losing my grandpa. And I don't know the song, but I remember the moment that I'm sitting with a guitar and just writing words down. And through my journey dealing with addiction, mental illness, I have leaned more into that, just due to the fact that the melody created a comfort zone for me. And then being able to put my story and tell my story is huge in anybody's journey. So being able to have my song and my lyrics combined, it was just a really cool moment. And from that space, I interviewed with a company and they're like, hey, I have an idea. Would you like to run a songwriting workshop? And I was like, okay, not sure how it was going to look. And then they just dropped me in. And I was like, okay, this is my sweet spot. And I wrote with, there's 30 people in that group, all experienced very traumatic events. And we ended up writing a song in almost an hour and a half, which doesn't happen often. It was one of the coolest experiences I've ever gotten to be a part of. And it continues to happen. Sometimes I write with 30 people. Sometimes I write with 2 in couples. Sometimes I write just with individuals. And it's really not about, trying to write that next number one. It's more about just having that person feel seen in that moment. And being able to say, hey, this is my story in a most beautiful and poetic way. And it's mostly them doing the work. I just get to be a small part of it, witness it, and catch the words that come out. So super blessed.
Yeah. So is it something where the person actually, you like record the performance, or do you take it and kind of produce it on your own and then give it back to them, or does it change? Like, what does that usually look like?
So at first, like I was really I honed in on, okay, we got to finish this song and like have the basics hammered down. Like the lyrics, we may have 1 or 2 lines I might have to tweak just for melodic purposes. And then I'd go out and produce it professionally or have one of my guys produce for me and I sing on it. And then what we do is we send it back to them.
That's so cool.
So I send them a lyric sheet and then also the song with them. Yeah, it is super cool. And I
feel like after the session's over, that then gives somebody something else to look forward to, because they're with you because something bad has happened. Clearly, that I can't imagine too many other situations where that would occur. But then after it's over, it could probably feel a little bit like, oh, okay, now what? But then if you're going to take it and do the work with it and then bring it back to them, it gives them something like, okay, I'm going to be back in, I don't know what the time frame is, a week or whatever it is. Yeah. And then that gives them another little nugget, when it doesn't seem like there probably is any other. And then that gets them to the next thing and the next thing. And it's just like that first step in the process. It's really amazing.
And that kind of goes to show, like, music has been a part of almost everyone's life, whether it be like traditional music like we hear on the radio, or just like your heart creates a beat on its own without us even trying, right? And it's like when we watch movies or when we think of that person that we really loved or we really lost, we have that song connected. And the song acts as like an anchor that will take us right back to that moment. In which what my job is to create that space and that moment for people. So whenever they need the anchor to remember all of the healing they've gone through, then that song can create that anchor. And it's just like going through, like, had a bad day, throw the song on. And it's a huge coping skill for people. And a lot of people use music as coping skills without even knowing it. We naturally lean towards the things we want to feel. But yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, it is. It's very cool. It means different things to different people too. Because I think we talked about this on the plane a little bit. I'm like, when I'm happy, I'm listening to like this seemingly angriest music that so I'm just like, yeah, oh yeah. And people, I remember, actually, I don't remember if we talked about this on the plane, but my future father-in-law, when I was dating my wife, he saw me driving around town just doing errands or whatever. And I don't know which band I was listening to, but I was listening to some sort of metalcore band, and I was just like screaming in the truck and like drumming on the steering wheel. And then like he went home and talked to my wife and was like, "Are you sure about that?" Like he was like screaming in his truck while driving around town. I had no idea. I didn't care. I didn't care if anybody saw me, but that's when I'm my happiest, is when I'm listening to angry music that might scare other people. So I guess different strokes for different folks, I suppose.
Oh, definitely. I'm a sad song girl, for real. Like, if I'm happy,
I love sad songs.
Probably listening to some depressing stuff. It's just how it goes. It's okay though,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I love sad songs too, but they do make me sad. So I cry. I cry easy. I cry easy. I cry often, and I'm not afraid to admit it. It's just,
I love that.
I mean, Pixar movies, you name it, it'll get me going. It's not tough.
Okay, I am I the only person that cries more when a dog dies than when a human does?
No, I think that's pretty normal. I think that's pretty common.
The emotional connection with dogs in movies is just too much.
I don't usually have that, right? I'm usually kind of I'm okay with a few exceptions. Like, well, for instance, like my wife's like, one day I'm gonna get you to watch Marley and Me, and I'm like, no, you're not. I already know what happens. I'm not watching that movie. I'll cry the whole time. Why do I need that? Like, I'll cry over something else. I don't know. I know that movie will mess me up. I already know what happens. I'm not gonna watch
it's awful.
it. Nope.
It's awful. Don't put yourself through that.
No. I don't know. It's one thing if you watch it when it comes out and you didn't know, but I'm not gonna willingly put myself there.
Yeah.
That and Revolutionary Road. I'm never gonna watch Revolutionary Road again either. I don't know if you've seen that either. But it's so depressing. Completely different kinds of depressing, but depressing all the same.
I have to say, all of my favorite movies, like A Star Is Born,
I like that one.
Greatest Showman, just very sad movies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do like some sad movies, but some I just, I can deal with once, and I don't need to deal with that again.
That makes sense.
Hi, I'm Vincent, and I'm here to talk about the Maris Mercury X. My dad's always going on and on about how cool Maris is. He really went off on one about the Mercury X the other day. He said something about a 4,800 hertz sample rate and 99 preset locations in 33 banks, and something along the lines of the most advanced reverb pedal ever devised by man? That's all true, but I only care about one thing. This pedal sounds sick. So make sure you check out the Mercury X and all the other fine products at maris.us, as well as fine retailers worldwide. All right, Dad, now can I have my Pocky?
How exactly do artists get their music on Spotify, Apple Music, Deezer, Tidal, all these services? How in the world do you get your music there? Well, in the past, you had to use something called a record label. But these days, you can use DistroKid. DistroKid is the absolute easiest way to get your music up on streaming services, and it's the most affordable way to do so. Not only do plans start at $22.99 for the entire year, that's less than $2 a month, DistroKid also does not take a cut of your streaming revenue, unlike some other services out there. Even better if you sign up by going to tonemob.com/distrokid. That's tonemob.com/distrokid. One more time, that's tonemob.com/distrokid. You'll get 30% off. That's right, 30% off their already extremely reasonable prices. So go to tonemob.com/distrokid and get your music out there.
Makes sense.
I don't know. I'm kind of in this sort of weird situation. It's great most of the time where I have a big family that all lives fairly close by. When I was born, this sounds weird, but I had 11 parents, great-grandparents, grandparents, like 11 total were alive when I was born.
That is truly impressive.
It's pretty wild. And most of them lived pretty close by. Not all of them, but most of them did. So I experienced a lot of death really young because it was like, oh, great grandpa died, it was just like, and I knew these people. Like, I mowed my great grandpa's lawn till I was like, till he passed when I was like, I don't know, 14 or 15, something like that. Maybe I was a little older. So I really knew him. We would sit and talk and watch John Wayne movies. And like, I think a lot of people don't get that time with those people. So it's like, that's the good side. But the rough side is you lose them. And so having a lot of that growing up has kind of made me, I didn't realize that wasn't normal for a long time. I thought everybody experienced a lot of death and saw a lot of people die, like actually right there. And most people don't. I'm starting to realize it's I don't know where I was going with that. See, these things just happen on the podcast.
Yeah, it's all good. No, it's weird how we think things are normal, and then we grow up, and then we're like, oh, that wasn't normal.
Yeah, you mentioned that on the ride. What kind of things in your life were that way?
Oh Lord, I grew up in a very, very religious community, ultra religious. So a lot of the things, like, we weren't really allowed to hug. It was more like a side hug deal. Women weren't expected. Well, women aren't allowed to be in leadership roles. A man had to step in that as soon as like boys turned like 15 or 16. Like, women couldn't teach them anymore.
So I still learned from my mom. So that's kind of weird. All right.
But it was just very different. I grew up like, man is the head of the household, right? Word goes in church a lot. And like, it's normal to a degree in the South. But like, once you get beyond the South, like go to cities and everything, like a lot of the things I was raised in, I'm like, what? And there's a lot of things that come up now. Like whenever I step into leadership positions, like when I lead these groups and there are men in the group, like I get this, like, and it's not true, but that what was taught inside of me is like, I don't know, should I do this? Like, is this right? And it's not that like I believe that anymore. I think women have, a great viewpoint to teach, right?
Sure.
But it's something that stuck with me. There's a lot of conditioning that stuck with me. And it's not that I dislike the way I was raised. It's just, there was a lot of pain that happened and there was a lot of good, and they don't have to be mutually exclusive.
Right.
So it's like I was taught a lot, but also I'm having to unteach myself. But yeah, I'm thankful for the way I was raised, and I don't blame anybody for it. But it definitely caused me a lot of pain in
probably in unexpected ways, I would imagine.
Yeah. So I am gay, and in my religion, absolutely not. I was raised saying, like, I was going to hell my whole entire life. I was going to be separated from my family forever. I wouldn't be able to live eternally with them. So I remember, like, when I was probably like 8 or 9, I always was scared to shower for the fact that I thought they were going to leave me behind. And it's just like, it is that thought process of like, that's kind of sad. Yeah. But I mean, I've grown through a lot of it. But that internal truth again, that I don't necessarily adhere to anymore, that like, I am bad. I was born just bad. So having to work through all of that, and that kind of goes more into my story of, I leaned more into drugs and alcohol to try to fit in somewhere, and end all of that pain that I felt when I was a kid, because I never felt like I belonged. Like I didn't belong in my family. I was different. I didn't belong in the church. So, I was just looking for a home anywhere, and drugs and alcohol were what I stepped into. And it kind of really got off to the races when I moved to Nashville. So it got to the point where I just hated writing anymore, and I hated life the way it was. So I know how to change. And that's kind of when I picked up writing for healing purposes. So.
Yeah. Was that more of a solitary thing? Like you were by yourself just trying to kind of escape? Or was it more of a social thing? Or, hey, we're all going out getting hammered. And then it becomes all the time, like we're all we do is go get hammered. Or was it more of a solitary thing that you just kind of, tried to medicate?
Yeah, I would say it was both, completely and totally, because it was just fun, right? First time I tried cocaine, it was great. Until, it was a social thing and we were doing it every single night. And then also when I was getting home, I was getting even worse. I would just drink to oblivion, right? Drink until I blacked out, and then I'd get up the next day and do it again. And it's just like what really kind of clicked in my head of like, ooh, this isn't a good look. Is like almost every story that like my buddies, we were all talking, and it was like, man, you were so plastered, you don't even remember. Or waking up,
right?
And, like, I don't know how I got home, but my car's in the driveway. It's just like that kind of behavior. It's just like, it wasn't good, especially because it's like, I ain't trying to hurt nobody. Like, that's not who I am. Like, I'm a softie. It may not look like it presenting, but I really am. Like, I care about people. I really do. And it's just like, drugs and alcohol made me the person I wasn't. Like, getting in fights, just no good, And it took time for me to kind of settle in, to be okay with who I was. And somebody created that space for me to heal. And from that point on, it was just like, man, that's what I want to do. Like, I want to create space for people to heal. And whatever, it doesn't have to be drugs and alcohol. It can be, like, dude, I just had a bad breakup. Let's talk about it, It doesn't have to be extreme for healing to happen.
True. I mean, everybody's dealing with something, and there's, very different spectrums of what that looks like. That's not how you say that, but you know what I mean. It just varies a lot. I think sometimes I'm like, I'm pretty all right. I'm pretty mentally healthy. And then I'll just think a little bit closer and I'm like, well, yeah, but that doesn't mean you don't got things you need to pay attention to, like you do that, that's not great. You do that, that's not great. Not to try to beat myself up, but some level of self-awareness has to be there, or else you do just keep doing the things that are hurting you or those around you over and over again. Did you have a moment that kind of like, hey Mo, you do this again, you might die, or like you almost killed this person, or it's like something that really shook you up? Or was it just like a culmination of like, this is enough?
There was like, so I hold myself to high standards, right? Sure. I was very functional, right? I could live and hold a job. That's what I tell myself. And then I used to say, like, I'll never drink on a job, right? Never. And when that started happening, and then driving started happening more, then, like, I'm okay to hurt myself, but I'm not okay to hurt other people.
Right.
Which is messed up, We've moved past that moment. But, like, I'm okay to be miserable, but I ain't trying to destroy somebody else's life. Because of the position and the job I was in, like, it was possible. Not that I did that, but that scared the living crap out of me. I was like, look, they hired me to help humans. And it wasn't in the current position I'm in, but they hired me to help humans. And I couldn't make it through the day without shaking so bad. So I had to go home on lunch and drink. And it's just like, it's just the pure suffering of that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, it's soul suffering too. I always say, of like, I don't know if I believe in hell, but I sure was living in it for the last 3 years, like, of just constant suffering. And I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. Hell, I wouldn't wish that on the devil. Like, it's awful. And it's why I'm drawn to people that are going through it, right? The only way I keep what I have is by giving it away. So
that's got to be, not that I want to or want anybody to ever go through that, but to do what you do now, it almost like, it's probably a really weird way to say this, but from the people you're helping's perspective, it almost gives you some street cred, you know? It's like because they're like, because a lot of the mindset with people that are going through that is like, you don't know what I've been through, you don't understand, you don't know. And a lot of times that's true. But you can be like, well, actually, I've been in a similar situation before, and somebody helped me, and now I'm trying to do that for you. And that I could imagine from their perspective, that kind of being like, oh, all right, I'll give her a chance, you know?
yeah.
Like, I don't know, is that accurate?
Yeah. There's a healthy amount of self-disclosure that can go into what I do, right? Because ultimately it's about them, but to let a person know they're not alone and that somebody else understands is like kind of the greatest gift you can give somebody. And I tell everybody that's like newly sober and like they're talking about like, whoa, like I'm 34 and I haven't done any, like I haven't had a job in 10 years. I was like, dude, you got a life degree. Like you've experienced to the extreme of life. Like we can literally do whatever you want. Like, let's work together in this. Like you're not alone. Everybody started from this point, right? And it's like at that point, there's different levels of lows, right? There's people that like literally are living on the street. But it's a really kind of cool moment to kind of just sit there with somebody and be like, I've been where you've been. Like, I'm here if you want to change. And ultimately, I can't make that decision for you. But, you know, whenever you're ready, I'll be here.
That's the hardest part. I've had a small degree of experience with this, very, very small, especially compared to you. And the people that really needed the help, if that's the saddest part, is when they don't want it. Because you're like, man, you're in a bad way. But there's absolutely, you can't force anybody to do anything. You can't. And I think people sometimes think that you can, but you can't if they don't want it. It's almost a waste of time, really, at the end of the day.
For sure. I mean, and like, there's a fine line between, you know, enabling and forcing somebody. You know, like, okay, I'm going to force you into rehab 20 times, you know, and they're just not ready. And like, there's a saying, like, it takes what it takes. You know?
Okay.
And unfortunately, like, there is a bleak outcome for addiction, right? Jail is institution and death. And unfortunately, some people, like, they die because their suffering was so much that they didn't see another way out. And it's really sad to talk about. I've lost plenty of friends and I've worked in, like, treatment and I've lost patients and clients, and it's sad, but then you have those people that actually, like, they finally get it. Or they were here 3 years ago, and now they care 3 years later because we planted a seed.
Right.
You know, it's like you never know where you're at in that process, and that's up to the person. But it is, you know, some responsibility of the people. Some responsibility of the people to be like, yo, I got you when you're ready, you know? Mm-hmm. So it's a cool moment that I get to sit in. Sometimes, you know, that isn't always the case.
Right. Sure. Is there this is probably a dumb question, but is there a typical, when it is a positive outcome, is there any pattern to what that looks like, or is it really different for everybody?
I would say there are communities of people out there that have pretty impressive outcomes if the people actually want it, if they actually work for it. But it kind of looks different for everybody. What I did and what I continue to do is different than a lot of people. And I always say when I'm leading groups, not necessarily to songwriting, but like whatever works for you, go for it. And like you have to figure that out. Whatever your answer it is to helping yourself, go for it. You know, this is a healing process, and it looks different for everybody, whether you're in addiction, mental health, right? Sometimes it's taking psychiatric meds. Go for it. Sometimes it's getting off psychiatric meds. I'm not a doctor. Do what you need to do. But whatever works for you, I'm here for it. So, no, there isn't one path. I know there's a group of people that is a simple solution to a very complex problem. And I really do. I've seen that work in my life, but yeah.
So let's go into when you were flying. I was flying from Nashville back home.
Yeah.
You were going, if I remember correctly, to Utah.
I was.
Is that right? And you were going there specifically to do this. Now, this seems like a pretty new concept. I know music therapy has been a thing, but that's a totally different thing. I've had music therapists on this podcast, and we went through some of the things that they do. Makes a lot of sense. I think it's super cool. But what you're doing, I've never heard of in any capacity. And apparently other people are seeing some value in it too, because they're like, well, you need to come to Utah now to hang out and do some of this.
Yeah.
How receptive has the addiction and mental health treatment community been to this seemingly kind of novel approach?
So I wouldn't say it's necessarily new. You see a lot of it with veterans. There's a lot of programs that offer like veterans like kind of a weekend retreat basically to write songs. It isn't a new process, but my goal is to create that space for people that don't necessarily have gone to war. You know? I want to be able to go with individuals that are just experience depression, and it is a lot different from music therapy. I don't claim to be a music therapist. I'm purely just a songwriter that enjoys listening to stories and kind of guides that process. And that's how I spin it to everyone almost of like, hey, look, this really did work for me. And it's kind of cool to get to share my story a little bit. And then also, I mean, the work speaks for itself. I didn't sell any of this. I kind of like stumbled into it with one company. And within 6 months, I'm in Ashland, North Carolina, Utah, up in Ohio, like this. And it's not necessarily me. It's just the service that is provided. Yeah. Music is healing, and for people to be able to tell their story through that is kind of a very cool aspect, because a lot of people, like, they go to therapy for a while or they go to these retreats, right? They have that emotional high, right? We've worked through a lot of stuff. I'm feeling great, but now they hit a low after because you have all of the support during that weekend. And that's where that tangible song, again, to the anchor point, can anchor them to that healing spot. It brings back all of those things that we worked on very subconsciously. We don't have to think about that.
Music is it's one of the most interesting things, because I've heard people say, "Oh, I'm not really that into music. I don't know anything about music, et cetera, et cetera." And I believe that, like, people like you and I get hyper obsessed in one way or another with different facets of music, and it leads to jobs sometimes, which is interesting and fun. But I feel like people, when they're like, "I'm not that into music," I'm like, I think you're not quite thinking about this it doesn't have to be your hobby, but I don't think people realize how much they're constantly surrounded by it, or how much their favorite movie would be different if the music wasn't the same. Would Star Wars even be that good if John Williams hadn't wrote all that music for it? It's debatable, right? It could be maybe a little questionable in some spots, but you get them horns going, and it's a different thing. But do you have patients or people that you work with that kind of come at it with that attitude? Like, I don't know anything about music. I don't care about music. Why do we want to do that? And then how do you break through that?
Yes, completely and totally. Right. I've sat across from business owners, completely analytical minds. And it takes a little bit more on my part to kind of get them to that point. Right. But I pitch it of, we're just going to have a conversation. And a lot of the places I work for and with, they have already been working through a little bit of therapy.
Okay.
So they're there for a reason. And I kind of hone in on that. And it's like, because my brain, I am a writer and also a musician, right? So I can kind of connect with them on both sides, and I can get on their level and be like, cracking jokes and just having a good time. Because at the end of the day, we're two people sharing experience together. So I try to take, all of the pressure off the table and say, hey, we're just here. We're going to hang out for 2.5 hours or so. And whatever comes of it comes. But my job is to kind of sit here and kind of steer this conversation to give you something to hold on to after this process. But yeah, I've had accountants in groups, and she's like, oh, sorry, I'm not super creative. And I'm like, but you kind of are. And she ends up going up to the board and correcting everything on the board. Verbiage and all of this, because it's something I very much am not great at, And I was like, look, everybody really does have a part in this, no matter what your part is. And we say in the room, without one person in the room that we're writing with, it wouldn't be the same song, because your presence in the room does make a difference. No matter if you contribute 1 word or 5 words, it's important that you're here with us right now.
Yeah. Well, it changes the whole vibe. So maybe they only did contribute 1 word or one, hey, maybe we go up instead of down here. Whatever the case may be. Mm-hmm. It's the response to that then impacts the rest of it. So, and sometimes people, I've had people that I've wrote songs with, it's they weren't really, you could tell they weren't really that into the thing. And they're just like, hey, what if we tried this? And then you try it. And it's that's it. You don't even care about this that much, but that's the thing that we needed. Mm-hmm. And they're like, oh, okay. And then, it's always a bass player.
That's funny. That's a good musician joke. Oh, goodness.
Yeah, that's just been my experience. Anyway. Yeah. It's just no, they're just kind of back there. And then they're like, what if we tried just a pause there? Oh, that's the thing. Yeah. And if that person hadn't been there, the energy would have been different. Then that little contribution sometimes makes the whole song. And you just never know what that might be.
Mm-hmm. And it's just everybody does truly have a creative side. And as we get older, we start losing it for the people that aren't super indulging in hobbies, tasks that are creative. We start to lose it as we get older and older, right? How many adults, if you sit them in the room and you're like, hey, draw a house, and they're like, oh, I'm not an artist. I could, if you were to give me $1 for every person that said that, I would be a millionaire right now with how many rooms I've sat in. And it's just dude, you don't have to put down your art. We're all doing the best we can. But a child would never say that, right? A child's just
We are brought to you today by Sweetwater, specifically the Gear Exchange. You may have heard about this. This is a place where you can go to buy and sell your used gear. Maybe you got a pedal over there that's just kind of collecting dust. Maybe there's something you've been eyeing from the Sweetwater catalog. Well, right now is a great time to turn that unused gear into something you're actually going to use. Even better, if you sell on the Gear Exchange, you can keep 100% of the sale as long as you choose a Sweetwater gift card as your payout method. That is not too shabby, because let's be honest, most of this buying and selling we do is just to fund new gear purchases, and that is a great way to reach a wide variety of customers and keep 100% in your pocket, or rather on your pedal board. So go check out the Sweetwater Gear Exchange and turn that unused gear into something that's actually going to help you write that next huge riff.
Hello there. I'd like to introduce you to your new best friend, the Chase Bliss Audio Lossy. Lossy is a collaboration between Chase Bliss and Good Hertz. And it's meant to give you some control over those weird digital artifacts that come with very compressed audio. You're hearing it right now. All the changes that are taking place are strictly coming from my playing dynamics. I'm just interacting with the pedal and letting it do its thing. In some true stereo goodness. If you'd like some more details about Lossy, I'd invite you to head over to chaseblissaudio.com. I think you're going to like what you find.
You know, squiggly lines, is that a house? I'm not really sure. I mean, you have kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like we get away from that as we get older and older. And then we go into jobs and like there's no mistakes to be made, right? Everything has to be pretty, has to be perfect. But we also have that inner child in us that's just like, ooh, let's draw a squiggly line house, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of breaking into that of like, dude, like you are an artist and it looks different for everybody. Like some people draw squiggly houses, some people build them with a paper.
Right.
You know, go
That's
for
true.
it. Whatever your heart desires, I'm here for it. But it's just like, it's encouraging that part of the person to come out of like, let's just play around. It's the goofy side that we all like love and laugh with, right? When we're comfortable with family, that's the side that is that creative and fun side that I try to tap in with everybody. And it's different each session. So,
yeah. Well, and you kind of have to nourish it and have to actively pursue it, or it's just like exercising a muscle. Like it'll get weaker and weaker the less you use it. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. I know for me, even, and the listeners have heard this a million times, but you know, whatever. For me, like I fell in love with pedals. I love pedals. I have a ridiculous amount of guitar pedals, and I'm obsessed with them. And I would make all these little video demos and do all these things and like, yeah, this is how this one works. And ooh, what chips in here and blah, like to the point where, you know, in 2021, I realized I was like, man, you're like, I kind of got bored with even that aspect of it. Like, okay, here's another overdrive. I've seen this before, you know. Oh, this one's kind of different, but you know, mostly the same as this one. And I was getting kind of jaded, like a little bit mentally. And then I thought to myself, I was like, why did you get into all this stuff in the first place? Why? Why did you like this fuzz pedal over that fuzz pedal? Why do you even know what that means? Why did you ever embark on this journey? And now you're just kind of starting to fall out of it a little bit. And I realized it was like, oh, well, it's just because of music. And so I just started making music to make music and not worrying about, like, I use a lot of pedals to make my weird, stupid things that I do, but like it became about the songs and about the sounds and less about what am I using. It's more like, what do I need to make this sound that I'm picturing up here, and less about here's the thing and I'm going to show you what that thing does. And so, you know, I've had to actively pursue that. And it was a little bit of a challenge at first, but once it started flowing, it felt way better, and I've gained way more of an appreciation for doing what I do again, you know, and I'll still do demos. I'll always do that kind of stuff, but it became less about the gear and more about what the gear brings out of the people. And that was very refreshing.
Yeah. And I experienced the same thing, like on the writer side things. I'm like, oh, that would be a great hook. Let's go with that. And a lot of times it's like, this is a work of art, like, and this is theirs. So my job is to make it sound good, right, and create their art. it's not mine, right? And a lot of times
right.
I want it to be perfect. I was like, oh, this hook doesn't fall right, and the line here. And it's not that I botch songs. That's not what I'm saying, but it's that like, dude, the song's good enough, and it is their piece of art. So a lot of times I want to be like touching it and like tweaking it, like, oh, this word would look good. And I'm just like hands off, and just disconnecting from my expectations of a session. I had a session where I just sat playing the guitar and the dude started singing. And I just let it happen, It wasn't about trying to catch it on record, right? You hear it all the time when we're musicians. Like, as soon as you hit the record button, like, the genius leaves the room for some reason. At least it's my experience,
Yes.
So it was just about sitting in that moment with that person, and taking it back to the basics of like, it's just music and it's your story, and that's the beauty. It's not trying to make it perfection,
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, there's a event that I covered a long time ago when I was still trying to figure out like my role as a quote unquote media entity. I was trying to figure out like, what kind of things do I want to cover? Like, how do I want to approach this? And there was a blog article that I had somebody submit to my website, and it was about play music on the porch day. And it was just, that's all it was. It was just play music on, like, hey, on this day, everybody who's participating, go play music on your porch. And it wasn't about recording it and even posting it to the social or anything like that. It was just like, go outside and play music. Just play your guitar, play your keyboard, sing, whatever it happens to be. I was like, what a beautiful thing. Really.
I love
what
that.
A beautiful thing. It really brings it back to what it's all about. Recording's amazing. I love being in the recording studio. I absolutely love that process. I love it. But at the end of the day, like, that's not how or why the guitar was invented. It wasn't. It was just to be experienced by the player and whoever happened to be within, the immediate vicinity, and that was it. Yeah. It's kind of a primal thing, not the guitar specifically, but music is clearly a primal thing, like deep in humans for whatever reason.
Yeah. Well, it's just like everything kind of does revolve around rhythm, right? And like even music is traced back to like before language.
Right.
It's how people shared stories, right? And it's just like it's cool. I'm constantly a student of music. I love learning. Like, I could nerd out over music all day.
When you say that, do you mean it more from a theory perspective or from just a history perspective, or yes, all of it? What do you mean by that?
All of it. I mean, nice. I am not a huge theories. I play by ear all the time. And then when I hear something, I'm like, here's something cool that I've never heard before. We call them out-of-towner chords here in Nashville.
I like that. Okay.
I'm like, ooh, how'd you play that? I was in a session the other day, and this dude's like all up the guitar, and I was like, can you teach me? Like, I'm just constant. But
the James Bond chord. Yeah.
I just love learning. If I were to learn theory, I'd probably dig that too. But
I don't know. I just make noise. I am terrible at theory too. I barely know what chord I'm playing 90% of the time. People ask me, how'd you do that? I'm like, ooh, I don't know. We'll have to go back and look because I don't really know what I'm doing.
Yeah, I just have to show people. I was like, this is what I'm doing. I just removed this finger on this chord and it sounds cool. And then I slid up the...
like, I don't know what it is. It's something.
The dude I play with often, he plays lead. And I was like, I don't know what key it's in, but because all of my guitars I play a full step down. So
very nice.
It throws off a lot of people whenever I'm playing on stage. It can get interesting. Nashville, everybody chips in as far as ride rounds. Like, so if somebody can solo over something, they will.
Sure.
So
yeah,
it throws people off.
Yeah. I just got my first 8-string, so I'm trying to figure out like, this chunky huge fat neck. I'm like, ooh, I don't know what to do here, but it's fun. So yeah, I never know what I'm doing. It's fine. And yeah, these things are all tuned to, I don't even hardly know sometimes. There's some semblance of the same pattern as standard tuning, but it's like it's drop Q. I don't know what it is. It sounds cool.
You drop something. Oh, goodness.
Exactly. So we're getting kind of close to the end of the podcast, and I have a couple of classic questions that I ask to wrap these things up. But before I do that and we move on to Patreon and whatnot, I like to give the guests a chance to take the floor. You know, talking to a couple thousand people right now. If you got anything you want to share with those people, or if you got anybody you want to shout out, or if you got anything you want to say, you know, you're standing in front of an audience right now. So it's not just me. So whatever you want to say to a bunch of people right now, now's the time to do it.
I would say your story is your song, and that's really important to share with others.
Nice.
And whatever way to do that, it's important. So, yeah. And
I like
if
that.
you want to follow me on socials, that's cool too. It's Mo Tedder
Cool.
or Healing Heartstrings. So,
all right. Those links will be in the show notes, everybody. So you can find those wherever you're listening to those podcasts. Just click on that link and it'll take you where you need to go. And if it doesn't, well, that means I screwed it up. So let me know. All right. Final questions. First one, what is your favorite Boss pedal? And that'll be interesting since I know you primarily play acoustic.
this is going to be funny. The
All
tuner.
right, I'm ready. No, that's the most common answer, actually. I mean, you gotta have
you can
a tuner.
teach me some things, right?
You gotta have a tuner. You got to. And I think I don't know this for sure, but I'm pretty sure the Boss tuner is the first pedal tuner. I think it was, or it definitely is the most widely used one. So it's a solid answer. Got to stay in tune.
It's a must.
Try some reverb on your acoustic sometime, though. It's real nice. I'm just saying. I'm just throwing it out there. Get you an RV6 or something, and you might find some new inspiration.
I'm gonna have to get your actual number instead of your email.
That's perfectly fine. We'll figure that out. I'll send that to you. All right. Final question. This is the one that gets a little dicey. This is the one where people really get, it can get heated, but we'll see where it goes. What's your favorite kind of pizza?
Oh, easy.
All right.
And it doesn't involve pineapples because
thank you.
Questionable for those people, It's going to have to be the chicken bacon ranch pizza.
Chicken bacon ranch. That's not as common of an answer.
It will change your life if you've never tried it.
I've had chicken bacon ranch. I'm a little bit of I'm coming slightly around. I'm a little bit anti-ranch. So,
I have a cheat code for you then.
Oh, I'm ready.
If you put Alfredo as the base instead of the ranch, so it's Alfredo, cheese, chicken, bacon.
Now you're talking.
Okay. I get it from Domino's, the handmade, whatever, the deep crust that crusts over the cheese.
Alfredo sauce swap the ranch for Alfredo, chicken, bacon, Alfredo. I'm on board with that. I already know. I already know that's good. Okay. I like that.
I mean,
now we got to take this a couple steps further just because you are in Nashville and I'm very familiar with the Nashville pizzas. So I need to implore you to visit a place called Smith & Lentz. Yeah, Smith & Lentz. It's called Smith & Lentz Brewing, and it was a brewery primarily before lockdown. Lockdown happened, and obviously they couldn't just, nobody was going to the brewery. So they started making pizzas. Their pizzas are incredible. The pizza is absolutely top-notch. One of the best in Nashville. And then there's another one called, I always forget the name of this place. It's primarily an Italian restaurant. I think it's just called Napoli, actually. Or Napoli, however you say that. I'll look it up and send it to you. But incredible pizzas. They have a 4-cheese pizza there that is just mind-blowingly good. And their pasta, best lasagna I've ever had. So that, and then of course 5 Points Pizza is the classic late night spot. You've probably, yes, Gotta love 5 points.
It's on every point of Nashville.
That's right. Well, thank you so much for hanging out. This was a really good time. I really enjoyed it, and maybe we'll get into some weirdness on the Patreon section if you have time. All right. All right, sounds good. All right, everybody. For Mo, this is Blake, and as always, folks, good luck and good tones. All right, folks, there you have it. I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. I really kind of wish we would have had an easy way to just record on the plane, because that would have been an epic podcast as well. That was really, really, really wonderful. I don't often get to have great conversations on planes, but at least we were able to recreate some of it here, and I'm so thankful that she came on and she's doing what she's doing. It's much needed in this crazy, chaotic world that we're living in. Additionally, if you want to hear more of this conversation, there's more over on Patreon. So if you want to support this podcast, you want to keep it going, you want to keep the lights on, literally help keep food on the table for my kids, you can go to patreon.com/tonemob, and for $5 a month, you will get extra bonus episodes. If you don't like the new ad setup, for $3 a month, you can get the ad-free feed. But I'd recommend going ahead and getting those bonus episodes, because you'll also get the ad-free feed if you go for that. And some of these conversations are just incredible. And Mo and I had a really fun one that I think you would really, really enjoy. So go check that out if you can. The links are in the show notes. And if you can't, I would just appreciate you telling somebody about it. Apparently, this crazy show was in the top 5% of podcasts that were shared on Spotify in 2022. Top 5%. Out of all the millions of podcasts, somehow this weird little guitar program was in the top 5% of shared shows. And I have to imagine that is due to me begging and pleading on most episodes for you to share it. And I thank you so, so much. If you've ever shared any portion of this with anybody, please, please do that. That is how this show keeps going. There are very, very little algorithmic pushes that podcasters have access to. As difficult as all the social ones and the YouTube algorithm is, and it's hard to crack and hard to figure out, at least there is something there that can push you to people that have never heard of you before. With podcasts, there isn't much of that at all still, even in 2022. So if you can share this with somebody, I would be so extremely grateful. Maybe we can crack into the top 2% next year. Who knows? Thank you so much to everyone who shared in 2022. I really appreciate it. All right. I will get out of your hair so you can get back to whatever it is you're doing, and I will talk to you on the internet very soon. One last thing before we totally sign off here. I just want to remind you that if you do any shopping at Stringjoy, that's Stringjoy guitar strings made in Nashville, that will help me out as well. As I've said for years, I'm heavily involved in that company, and I really do think they're making the best products on the market. So if you would like to try custom strings, go to tonemob.com/stringjoy and check them out today. I seriously love what the team down there is doing. I help them out with all kinds of things, and by you supporting them, you are also supporting me as well. And hey, you need some strings, so why not get some custom strings just for your guitar and playing style? Again, the link for that is tonemob.com/stringjoy, and that will take you right to their website, and you can do all your shopping through there, and that will help everyone involved out. So thank you very much. Talk to you next time. We are brought to you by the wonderful folks at Gun Street Wiring Shop. Yes, Gun Street Wiring Shop. I've talked about them before. I used to say based out of Bend, Oregon, but guess what? Sean moved to my neck of the woods. Sean's in Portland. Sean is awesome and has helped me with a bunch of stuff lately. And if you have wiring needs for your guitar, he can help you too. If you want to get weird with it, he can get weird. If you just need to spruce things up a little bit, there's your guy. He takes all the guesswork out of doing your guitar wiring, and he makes it simple, and his customer service is top-notch, and I can't say enough good things about Gun Street as a company. I really respect Sean and what he's all about, and the product is top-notch. I've got 3 different guitars that now have Gun Street harnesses in them, and I could not be happier. So go to gunstreetwiringshop.com and check them out.